What's going on, guys? This is Vahagraphy. I'm Vahagan, your rock and roll photographer. In my hands, I have a Nikon D6. Or is it the D5? It's the D5, not the D6. But in this video, I'm going to talk to you about the differences between both cameras. Okay? The Nikon D6 launched in 2020, 2 years after the launch of Nikon mirrorless Z6, Z7s with the new X-Speed 6 processor, the new autofocus, a totally different era of cameras when it comes to Nikon. They launched the D6 2 years after the launch of mirrorless. Okay, the D5 was launched in 2016, 4 years before that, with the X-Speed 5 processor. How much of a difference does this really make? Now, the differences between the D6 and the D5 are very subtle. The major differences are autofocus performance. Now, I've never used the D6. Maybe you Nikon D6 owners out there, comment in the comments below. Let me know. Two things I want to know. How much better is the autofocus on the D6 versus the D5 for those of you photographers that own both cameras, both flagships? And what I want to know is, when doing video, is the video like the Z6 autofocus performance? I want to know, did they solve the video autofocus on the D6 that you don't have on the D5? Because, you know, the D5 autofocus, when it comes to video, it's hard to manage. The autofocus just does not work well when doing video. I want to know if the D6, they solved this problem. Other than that, guys, the D5 versus the D6, I like to think of this camera as the older model car. For example, you got two cars, right? Same body style, same features, essentially the same car, but the 2020 model is a little bit faster, just a little bit quicker, handles a little bit better, but just almost the same car. I like to think of it as the D6 versus the D5 as that, because the differences are very, very subtle. Okay, we got the same sensor, you got the same ISO performance, almost the same camera, same resolution, same everything. You got more focus points on the D5 than the D6, but you got more cross types on the D6. So what I want to know is, how much better is the autofocus system on the D6 versus this camera right here? And is it worth the upgrade? Because what I thought and what I think is that it's almost the same camera. Even the cosmetics, the button layout, it's like the same camera. Same screen in the back, same resolution. The buttons are exactly the same. The only difference is this type, like the OVF. The D6 design is a little different. I think it scoops in a little higher, and the rear looks just a little different, this part of the camera. But other than that, the camera is almost the same. Again, sensors the same, ISO performance, just the autofocus points, the autofocus features are a little different. You got more features on the D6. When the D5 launched, you couldn't use the CF Express Type B cards, but with the firmware update, now you can use CF Express Type B cards on the D5. So other than that, guys, here's what I think happened. When the Z6 launched in 2018, they put the same processor in the D6 that the Z6 and Z7 had, the D5 still with the X-Speed 5 processor. How much of a big difference is that between both cameras? And is the upgrade pretty much worth it for you and for me? When these two cameras launched, they launched at the exact same price of $6,500 US. Now, 4 years apart. I got an email the other day, or was it a comment? Somebody said that, why do you guys say that the D5, why are you guys making it sound like this camera is so old? Well, in camera years, even a year is like already out of date, right? Not me. I don't think of it that way, but some people out there on the internet think that even 1 or 2 years, the camera's already out of date. You're talking to the wrong guy, man. You're talking to a guy that uses the D4 still to this day. I bought the Nikon D4 in 2012, brand new. Almost a decade and 2 years later, I still use that camera with a 500,000 shutter count. Still works for me. So you're preaching up the wrong tree. For me, the D5 is still a new camera. Again, I like to think of this camera as a DSLR from 2016 with new tech. This is what I think of the D5. This is, of course, what I think of the D6. But what I want to know is, what I want to ask you guys this question: is the upgrade worth it from a D5 to a D6? I'm not jonesing for a D6 right now. I'm not going to go out and buy one because I don't need it. I think what the D5 has, what I need in my photography life, I think the D6 it's essentially the same camera with a little bit better autofocus, a couple of extra features, Wi-Fi, a couple of other things, a new processor. But is that really an upgrade? Okay, 2 more frames per second as far as speed goes. More picture profiles on the D6 than the D5. I think when the Z6 line launched, they put some of the same features on that new mirrorless camera with this new processor on the D6. I think those are where the similarities end, with the new picture profiles, a little bit better autofocus system, more autofocus features. But same sensor, same low light performance, same camera essentially. I think the upgrade is really not a big upgrade in my opinion. Now, would I buy a D6 in the future? Before I answer that question, I just want to say that the reason why I think that they made a D6 in the first place after mirrorless was so they could complete that line of cameras, because back in the day, they ended the film line with the F6, right? Well, now the D5, Nikon felt that it was maybe incomplete. They'll launch the D6 because it was a transitional period for Nikon, right? Mirrorless launched in 2018, but they weren't quite done with DSLRs yet. And so what do? They released a new D6. Much of an upgrade? I don't know. Leave it in the comment. I want you guys to let me know what you think of the upgrade from the D5 to the D6 and if it's really worth it. And the question I want to ask is, for those of you who own both cameras or upgraded, was the autofocus that much of an improvement from the new processor, new DSLR, from the D5 to the D6? Now, will I buy a D6 in the future? Just for my collection, because I own the D3, the D2, the D4, the D5 now. And then the only flagship that I do not own is a D1, which I have no intentions of buying. The D6, I do have intention of buying just so I could round up the lineup in my collection. The only reason why I would buy one is for me to, first of all, I would have to find a really good deal on one. Secondly, that camera has to be very new, in my opinion, almost brand new to the point where I will pay money to own one. And it's having a camera that's the last of its kind, just having that camera, because I know that Nikon will never produce another DSLR again moving forward. That's the reason why I would like to find a D6 just to keep forever. So if I could find one for a good price, not because I need one, because the D5 is pretty much, like I said, in my opinion, it's pretty much the same camera. But that's why I would buy one, just to have and just to save and just to enjoy that camera for as long as I do photography. Because knowing that the amount of cameras that I own right now, including the Z9, Z6s, soon to be ZF, new Z6 line, and all these DSLRs that I have, that D6 that I eventually will buy in the future will get very little usage. I just want to save it. I just want to baby that camera, because I know that this is the last of the Mohicans. This is the last of that DSLR line, the end of the line. I want to have that camera in 2020. But again, I'm not jonesing for it. I'm not like, oh, I need to have it right now. No, only when I find one in good condition, only if I find one pristine, a collector's item for me because I'm a big fan of the D-line DSLR flagship unibody camera. And that's the only camera that I do not own right now. That's the latest, greatest DSLR. So I did own the D850. I had three D850s in my photography career. I've had bad luck with that camera. I've dropped a couple of them. It just did not work, after the drop. My fault, user error. It just left kind of like a bad taste in my mouth. I just sold all my D850s. Not that D850 is not a good camera. It just didn't work out for me. But it's a great camera. The D850, amazing high megapixel DSLR camera. Again, did that camera launch in 2016 as well? I think it did. So we got the D5s in 2016. We got the D850s in 2016. And I think we got the D500 too in 2016, right? Nikon was busy in 2016, and then 2018 mirrorless, and then 2020 the D6. So, and then the Z9 in 21 and 22, and now we're headed for maybe a future Z6 III, a Z7 III, a Z50 Mark II, a ZF Cinema line. Got you, Nikon, got you, right? Or maybe a Z9H, right? Hey, I love my Z9. I think that's more than enough for my photography needs at this point. That's my most used camera in my bag is the Nikon Z9. But again, my honest opinion, I don't think it's worth the upgrade to buy a D5, sell your D5 and buy a D6. It's not much of an upgrade. But prove me otherwise, guys, in the comments. Leave me that comment, you D6 owners. Let me know how much better that autofocus system is versus the D5. 2 frames per second is really not a big deal for me. Those Wi-Fi features, the GPS features that the D6 offers that the D5 doesn't, again, not a big deal to me. I shoot RAW, so those new picture profiles, not a big deal to me. DSLR video autofocus, maybe. So if the D6 has better autofocus DSLR video, then maybe that's a good one. But I just want to know if that autofocus works when shooting video with the D6. Leave me that comment. Again, you're using the same sensor, you're using not the same processor, but same low light performance. Is it the same low light performance? Because the native ISO is exactly the same, the ergonomics is exactly the same, and same 20 megapixel, 21 megapixel sensor. Leave me that comment. I would love to know. So those, like I said, not much of a difference, just autofocus features. You got less focus points on the D6 than you do on the D5, but you have more cross type on the D6. So, hey, leave me that comment. I'd like to know from you D6 and D5 users out there. Thank you for watching, guys. This camera is going to continue to rock in my library. I love this camera, and I'll still use the D5. And again, I'm not one of those photographers that think the D5 is out of date. And hell no. I don't even think the D3X is out of date, guys. I think the D3X rocks. I think the D3X, a camera that 2009, still use that camera. I love the look of these DSLRs. This is why I use these DSLRs, because it gives me a look, a feel that maybe the Z doesn't give me straight out of the box. Sure, you can edit the photos, you can manipulate them in a way to look like the D5, the D4, the D3X, but straight out of the camera, I feel like I get this look from DSLRs that I do not from the Z. But now, one other thing I want to just end with, DSLRs to me always work, no matter what. I pick it up, they're still reliable, they just work all the time, and never fail me once. And I've been to thousands of shoots, picked up a DSLR, and we just started working, and the feel of a DSLR is so much different than a Z mirrorless camera. I think it's just a machine. It feels good in the hand. I like the shutter noise. I like the shutter feel. I like it's power in your hand that you just don't get from the new mirrorless line. The new mirrorless line offers all this technology, offers amazing features, like a computer, but the analog feel of these DSLRs. You know that you have something's going on inside. A machine, a shutter, clack, 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 clack. I love it. And I still love my F-mount glass, guys. The 105, 1.4E, these telephoto lenses, these older F-mount 180 millimeter, 200 f2, these lenses that are F-mount, 28 1.4E lenses, the older AI lenses. You just attach it with no adapter needed, and it works on a DSLR flawlessly. You can't duplicate that on the new Z system. The new Z system has its advantages, these modern advantages that we know about. We all know what this Z glass is like. Technically perfect, edge to edge, beautiful bokeh at 1.2, the 85s, the 58s, the 50s. The F-mount also has its charm, its beauty, and its image. They're both different. It's character. So leave me that comment down below. Thank you for watching. Go out, shoot your photography, have fun, and rock and roll. This is Vahagraphy. I'm Vahagan, your rock and roll photographer. D4, D5, D6, it doesn't matter today. They still rock in 2024 in my opinion, and they're just as good as your new cameras from today. Rock and roll.